My name is Eleanor Parker. To the outside world, I might appear to be nothing more than an 81-year-old woman, white hair carefully combed, skin wrinkled by time, and a heart marked by too many storms. But behind these lines etched across my face, there are stories that still burn to be told. This is one of them. So if you're watching, baby, go ahead and like this video, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's story. 'Cause this ain't just my story, it's the story of too many women who had to smile through the silence. It is the story of the deepest betrayal a mother can endure the moment her own child, the very life she carried and nurtured, turned her away as if she were an unwanted possession. Yet, it is also the beginning of something I never expected to find again in the twilight of my years. The rediscovery of a love I thought had been erased by time. That morning began as many others had. Sunlight slipped through the lace curtains of my bedroom, casting warm patterns across the faded quilt on my bed. I woke feeling lighter than usual, filled with anticipation. My son, Thomas Parker, had promised to take me out to lunch. It had been months since he suggested such an outing. I chose my beige dress, the one I had worn on my 80th birthday, a dress that reminded me of better days. I dabbed a soft rose-colored lipstick on my thin lips and fastened a pearl pin at my collar. In the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, hair white but still neatly styled, eyes tired but still carrying a spark of life. When I heard the sound of tires on the gravel driveway, my heart skipped. I pulled on my cardigan and stepped outside. Thomas's black sedan waited by the curb. I saw his daughter, my granddaughter, Lily Parker, sitting quietly in the back seat. Her smile met mine, but I noticed something behind it. A sadness that didn't belong on the face of a 17-year-old girl. Lily's dream was to become a lawyer one day, a dream her father often dismissed with a careless wave of his hand, saying the law was a man's world. But I saw in her determination and sharp mind the very things that gave me hope for the future. As I slid into the car, the familiar scent of Thomas's expensive cologne filled the air. The same brand I had given him the Christmas before. My chest swelled with quiet pride, remembering the years I had sacrificed everything to see him succeed. We spoke lightly as he drove. I mentioned the weather, the state of my flower garden, the news I'd seen on television that morning. Everything seemed ordinary. But after a while, I realized the streets we were taking were not the usual route toward downtown Savannah, where all the restaurants were. Instead, the houses thinned, replaced by stretches of trees and tall iron fences. "Thomas," I asked softly, "isn't this the long way into the city?" "It's a shortcut," he answered too quickly, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Traffic's bad on the main avenue." I nodded and fell silent. For decades, I trusted every word that came from his lips. From the time he was a boy with scraped knees who promised me he hadn't broken the vase in the parlor, to the time he swore his failing grades were just temporary, I always believed him. Because to a mother, her son is always that little boy. But that morning, something stirred inside me, a knot in my stomach, the uneasy whisper of intuition. The car slowed as we approached a tall white gate with a polished brass sign. Silver Pines Assisted Living. I froze. The letters blurred before my eyes, and the air left my lungs in a rush. It felt as though the world had tilted beneath me. I turned to Thomas, desperate to find reassurance in his face. But his eyes avoided mine, focused instead on the steering wheel, as if it were the most fascinating object in the world. "Thomas, what is this place?" My voice trembled. He cleared his throat. "Don't make a scene, Mom. This is what's best for you. Silver Pines will take good care of you, Better than I can. My fingers fumbled for the car handle, but it was locked. Panic surged through me, my pulse quickening. Please, I whispered, tugging at the door. Don't do this. I can manage at home. I've never been a burden to you. Lily's sob caught my attention. I turned to see her pressed against the window, tears streaking down her young face. She opened her mouth to speak, but Thomas silenced her with a sharp glance. Two men in pale uniforms appeared at the gate and began walking toward us. My son stepped out, folder in hand, and handed over papers, documents he had clearly prepared in advance. I sat frozen, watching him point and sign as though finalizing the sale of some property. They opened my door. My legs gave out beneath me, and I collapsed against their firm arms. The world blurred as I begged, "Son, please, don't leave me here. I've given you everything. Please." But my words fell into the air like leaves into a storm, carried away unheard. "It's already paid for," he told the attendants calmly. 3 months in advance. 3 months. As if he were buying time away from me, like I was a responsibility to be outsourced. I turned back one last time. Through the glass, Lily pressed her small hand against the window. Her silent wave, her red-rimmed eyes, those images seared themselves into my soul. The men guided me up the stone path, each step dragging me farther from the life I had built, from the freedom I once held, from the dignity that had defined me. The tall building loomed ahead, its pristine facade hiding the truth of what it represented: exile, abandonment, betrayal. Inside, a polite receptionist handed me a clipboard, her words rehearsed and hollow. Someone offered me a glass of water I couldn't drink. Another showed me a simple room with a narrow bed and a dresser. I couldn't respond. My mind was blank, my voice trapped somewhere between my chest and my throat. The last memory I carried from that day was the taste of a pill dissolving on my tongue, its bitterness flooding my mouth, and the crushing silence of a room that was not my own. That night, I lay curled on the strange bed, every bone aching, every heartbeat echoing with betrayal. My only son, my Thomas, the boy I once sang to sleep, the child whose scraped knees I kissed, had locked me away like a burden too heavy to bear. And so began my new life at Silver Pines Assisted Living, a life I never asked for, a sentence I never deserved. But what I didn't know, as tears dampened my pillow that night, was that this same place of sorrow would soon reopen a door I thought had been sealed forever. A door to love, to truth, and to a second chance I never dared to dream of. The first nights at Silver Pines Assisted Living were the longest of my life. Every morning, I woke up with a start, confused by the beige walls, the faint smell of disinfectant, and the cold sheets that had never been warmed by me before. For a fleeting moment, in those first seconds after waking, I thought I was back in my own home, the sunlight spilling into my kitchen, the smell of brewed coffee drifting through the air. But the cruel truth returned swiftly, hitting me like a heavy door slammed shut. I wasn't home. I wasn't free. I was a prisoner. My small room had one narrow window. Outside, a patch of trimmed lawn stretched to a tall wooden fence, beyond which I could hear the distant hum of traffic, life going on without me. Inside, the room was decorated with furniture too polished, too impersonal, the kind that pretends to comfort, but only reminds you that countless others sat where you now sit, slept where you now sleep, before being carried out in silence. Breakfast was at 7 sharp. I was escorted to a communal dining hall where round tables were filled with residents, most staring down at plates of scrambled eggs or oatmeal. Some muttered to themselves, others chewed in silence, and a few wore the vacant expressions of those lost to illnesses that steal the mind before the body. The staff was efficient, but not warm. They spoke in rehearsed tones, their smiles mechanical. "Good morning, Mrs. Parker," they would say, though not one of them truly knew me. To them, I was another name on a chart, another body to feed, another pill to administer. By the second morning, I tried calling Thomas. He didn't answer. I tried again in the afternoon. Still nothing. When I finally reached his wife, Caroline, her voice was sharp and dismissive. "Eleanor, you need to stop calling. Thomas is busy, and this is for the best, for everyone. Please, just adapt." Adapt. The word stung like a lash. Adapt to what? To abandon? To betrayal? To the cruel knowledge that the child I had raised with love and sacrifice had thrown me into this place like unwanted furniture? That night, after lights out, I made my first attempt at escape. I put on my coat over my nightgown and slipped out of my room, careful not to draw attention. I made it down the hall, past the dimly lit nurse's station, and out into the garden. I ran, though at my age it was more of a stumble, toward the gate. My fingers wrapped around the iron bars, and I shook them with all the strength left in me. But the gate was locked with a heavy padlock. A guard found me there, clinging to the bars like a caged bird. His face carried not anger, but pity, as if he had seen this scene too many times before. Without a word, he guided me back to my room. I cried myself to sleep, the cold truth wrapping itself around me. There was no way out. In the days that followed, I began to notice the people around me. There was Mrs. Margaret Allen, an elegant woman of 85 who wore red lipstick every day, though no visitors ever came. Her children had sold her beach house and left her here years ago. She carried herself with dignity, telling her story in a calm voice that masked the deep wound inside her. Then there was Professor Henry Wallace, a retired history teacher with Parkinson's disease. His hands trembled so violently he could no longer hold the books he once lived for. Seeing his sorrow, I began reading to him in the afternoons Shakespeare, history essays, even the newspaper. Those moments gave me a small sense of purpose, a flicker of usefulness in a place where everything else felt stripped away. But the one who became my closest companion was Alice Munro, a sharp-minded woman of 90 with hair as white as snow. She had been there longer than most. She carried a shoebox under her bed, filled with letters she had written to grandchildren who never replied. One day, she told me, someone will read them, and know I never forgot them. Alice was the one who taught me how to survive Silver Pines. Which nurses were kind, which ones were impatient. How to save fruit from breakfast to eat later in the evening. Which chairs in the television lounge were less worn. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. It was Alice who finally placed a hardbound notebook in my hands one night. "Write," she told me firmly. "Don't let them erase your voice. Don't let him, your son, erase you." That night, under the dim glow of the bedside lamp, I opened the notebook and wrote my first entry. "I will not die here. Not yet." Silver Pines ran on routine. Every hour was accounted for, every moment controlled. Mondays were art therapy. We colored childish pictures with broken crayons, as if we were school children again. Tuesdays were exercise, led by a young woman who looked as though she resented being there, making us lift our arms and legs like props in her show. Wednesdays were visiting days, the hardest of all. Families would arrive with bouquets and cheap chocolates, smiling for 30 minutes before glancing at their watches and rushing off. I had no visitors. I sat in silence, watching others being embraced, listening to the footsteps fade away as doors closed and loneliness returned. Thursdays were beauty day. Our hair was cut short and practical, whether we wanted it or not. Dignity trimmed away with every snip. Fridays were reserved for Mass. A young priest spoke of patience and acceptance, virtues I found hard to practice when my life had been stolen from me. Weekends were barren, long stretches of silence, filled with the sound of televisions and the shuffle of wheelchairs. It was during one of those endless weekends that I discovered a small garden at the back of the facility. Hidden from most, it had a single wooden bench beneath a tree. There, away from the routines and the watching eyes of the staff, I began to spend hours with my notebook. I wrote of my anger at Thomas, of the betrayal that gnawed at my soul, of the memories of my husband, gone too soon, of the life I had built, now stripped away. And slowly, those pages became my refuge. When a nurse once asked what I was writing, I lied and said I was collecting old recipes. She smiled, satisfied with the harmless answer. Little did she know those pages held my escape plan, my darkest thoughts, and my refusal to be erased. 3 weeks passed before I saw Lily again. She arrived unexpectedly on a Tuesday, slipping in past the receptionist with a small package in her hands. When she appeared at my door, tears spilling down her cheeks, I thought my heart would shatter. She ran to me, her arms wrapping tightly around my frail frame. Between sobs, she told me she had fought with her father. She had begged him not to leave me here, but he silenced her. He had sold most of the furniture from my home and rented it out to strangers. The house I had lived in for 50 years, filled with memories of my late husband, was gone. Lily opened her package. Inside were the few treasures she had managed to save before everything was taken. My wedding photo in its old frame, my mother's silver cross, and a small album of family pictures. I stared at them in silence, unable to cry. The pain was too heavy for tears. "Why, Grandma?" Lily whispered. "Why did he do this to you?" I hesitated, searching for words. Finally, she confessed what she had overheard. Thomas needed my retirement checks. He was drowning in debts. To him, I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a monthly income. Her voice trembled. He said, "You're a burden. But you're not, Grandma. You're not." I held her face in my hands, looking at her tear-filled eyes. "Promise me, Lily, you'll be careful. Don't get into trouble because of me." She nodded, but I could see the fire in her young heart. A fire that gave me strength. After she left, I opened my notebook once more. With trembling hands, I wrote, "For Lily, I will fight. For myself, I will survive." The days ahead still stretched long and cruel, but now I had an anchor. Lily's love had pierced through the fog of betrayal. And though I did not yet know it, Silver Pines had more in store for me than despair. Because soon, in that hidden garden with its lonely wooden bench, I would encounter a face from my past, a face I had not seen in 60 years. A face that would change everything. Sundays at Silver Pines had a way of stretching time. The building calmed to a hush that wasn't quite peaceful, more like a held breath. The staff spoke in softer voices, the television volumes dipped, and someone wheeled a portable lectern into the multipurpose room and called it a chapel. Folding chairs appeared in neat rows, and a battery-powered candle trembled on a table draped in linen. The faint sweetness of artificial flowers mixed with the sharp tang of disinfectant and old carpet. I went because there was nowhere else to be. That morning, I hadn't slept. I had spent half the night rereading the small note Lily had tucked into my photo album. "I'm with you, Grandma. Don't give up." Those words warmed me and hollowed me at the same time. By the time the chaplain began, an earnest man with a warm drawl and a sermon about patience, my hands were cold. He invited us to think of a time we were carried, and I thought of the car door locking beside me, of Thomas's eyes avoiding mine, of Lily's palm pressed to the glass like a prayer. Halfway through a hymn, the room tilted. The gray carpet swam. I reached for the chair in front of me and missed. A pair of hands, warm, sturdy, calloused, caught my shoulders and steadied me as if I weighed nothing at all. "Easy now," a voice said, low, with a rasp that turned my bones to bells. "You all right, ma'am?" I turned. Time folded. 60 years collapsed into a heartbeat. The man's hair was white and clipped short. His jaw was leaner, his cheeks deeper, his skin mapped with the kind of lines you earn from sun and worry. A tremor feathered his right hand. But the eyes, dark, attentive, full of light like wet earth after rain, had not changed. My mouth formed the name before my mind permitted it. Charles. The room around us carried on, pages of hymnals turning, the chaplain's voice rounding another verse. But for me, the air thinned to two people standing too close in a place that suddenly felt too small. He blinked, and a smile flickered, longing and disbelief at once. "Nell," he said, "the nickname no one has spoken to me since I was 17 and reckless. Nell, is it really you?" My knees remembered gravity. He guided me back into the chair with a gentleness that unraveled me. We did not speak again until the final amen. When the folding chairs began scraping, he leaned closer, careful, as if approaching a wild bird. "There's a bench in the back garden," he murmured, "under the live oak. 5 o'clock. I nodded before fear could tell me not to. I spent the afternoon preparing the way a girl might for a dance. It was foolish, and I did it anyway. I pinned my hair into a tidy twist and smoothed my beige dress. I dabbed the rose lipstick Lily had brought me. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a girl. I saw an old woman, yes, but one with her shoulders a little straighter, and her eyes alive with stubborn light. Memories came uninvited. Heat shimmering above the river when we were young. Charles Whitman leaned his back against a cypress post at the dockyards, smelling faintly of salt and motor oil, telling me he would build a boat with his hands and sail me anywhere I wanted to go. Me laughing at the sight of his rolled shirt sleeves and the grease on his knuckles, and my father glaring from the veranda because the Caldwells didn't mix with boys who worked with their hands. Before I was Eleanor Parker, widow and mother, I was Eleanor Caldwell, the daughter of a man who measured love in property lines and contracts. I had learned early how to fold myself into the shape of someone else's expectation. With Charles, I had learned, briefly, how not to. At 5 minutes to 5, I left my room with my notebook tucked under my arm, as if I might need a shield. The back garden was the only part of Silver Pines that told the truth. The lawn was honestly green, not the shined wax of the hallways. A single live oak spread its arms wide, Spanish moss drifting like silk scarves caught on a breeze. The wooden bench beneath it had a dip worn by others who had waited before me. He was already there. Charles stood when he saw me, a little too fast for a man whose right hand trembled and whose left leg didn't always obey. He had a cane planewood, nicked. The kind of object that told you a person still meant to move forward. "I was afraid you'd change your mind," he said. "I was afraid you would," I answered. The way he laughed was new, quieter, wrapped in air, but I recognized the shape of it. He motioned to the bench. I sat, and he sat a breath away, our shoulders angled toward one another, practiced in the distance older people are taught to keep. "How are you here?" I managed. "My daughter, Rebecca," he said, eyes going briefly to the ground. "She lives in Savannah." I fell, nothing dramatic, a kitchen floor making its point, and she decided I needed support. He ironized the word with his mouth. She said Silver Pines had good ratings. They all say that, I murmured. He nodded. Been here 3 months. You? A few weeks, I said. My son, the word snagged in my throat. Thomas brought me here. Told me we were going to lunch. Charles's jaw set. Not pity, that would have broken me. Something steadier. Witness. Is that why I saw a storm in your eyes in there? He asked gently. It's been storming for a while. I looked at his trembling hand. And you? Your hand. Parkinson's, he said simply. Annoying companion. Doesn't like me stirring paint. Suppose it's the universe's way of making sure I sit still long enough to think. You still paint. My chest tightened. When we were young, he had sketched the river barges and my profile in the margins of grocery lists. Always certain colors would save him. Less, he said. But sometimes the afternoon light sneaks in and picks up the brush for me. We sat in the kind of silence that isn't empty. Cicadas rasped in the live oak. Somewhere, someone in the building laughed at an afternoon sitcom that was older than both of us. I could feel a new pulse in the day, like a door I thought was bricked closed creaking on its hinges. When did you stop calling me Nell? I asked finally. The night the world went sideways, he said, then stopped. His gaze hung on the moss, on the curve of the bench arm. There are things I need to tell you, he added. Things I should have told you before everything changed. I was going to today, but he swallowed. If you can spare me until tomorrow, I can do it properly. I owe you that. Tomorrow, I echoed, my mouth dry. All the old ghosts stirred. The unanswered letter that never came. The suitcase I had once hidden under my bed. My father's voice like cold metal. I have things too, I said. Not pretty ones. He turned back to me. The years fell away from his eyes. We can be ugly honest, he said. I'd rather that than pretty lies. We began with the easier ground, as if warming muscles before attempting a climb. He told me about Anita, the woman he had married a year after he left town. We were companions, he said. The words without apology. She was kind. She liked my quietness, and said it was what kept the world from barking. We didn't have fireworks, Nell. We had supper at the same table for 40 years. She died 5 years ago. I kept talking to her at night for too long. And Rebecca? Our only, he said. Sharp as a snapped twig. Good principal. Busy. She thinks I'm made of glass and stubborn. He smiled. Which isn't wrong. He asked about my life the way a person asks for a story, not a report. I told him about James Parker, the husband my father had chosen like a ledger entry. He wasn't cruel, I said. Just cold. We were roommates who signed cards together. I told him about raising Thomas mostly alone, about the pride and the distance, about the garden I loved and the way grief thins the air when a spouse dies. I left the hospital room where they'd told me James's heart had given up. I left out the night I stood in the kitchen and realized I had missed my life while living it. When I mentioned Lily, my throat softened. She wants to be a lawyer, I said, and told him about the recorded note, about the rescued photographs, about the way her hands had shook but her eyes hadn't. 17 and brave, he said. I'd like to meet her. If that's all right. I think she would like that, I said, surprising myself with how easily the words came. We kept talking until the light went amber and long. The live oak made a lace of shadows over our shoes. A nurse poked her head out the back door, saw us, and politely retreated. In the distance, the chaplain's voice drifted from a room where he was visiting someone else who had forgotten a son's face. I reached for my notebook, more out of habit than need. and Charles watched my hands the way men who have built things watch tools. "You still write?" he asked. When I remembered how, I said, "It's a way to tell myself I exist." He didn't say, "Of course you do." He said, "Keep doing it. The page holds better than people." Before we stood, we made a small agreement the way older people make large promises, simply. Same bench. Tomorrow. After supper. No one needed to say don't disappear. On our slow walk back through the corridor, Alice Munro appeared, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling with mock innocence. "Well," she said, adjusting the cardigan she refused to surrender to the laundry. "If it isn't the beginning of a scandal. About time someone around here reminded us we're alive." "I brought the scandal," I said dryly. He brought the cane. Alice's grin turned tender, the kind old women give one another when they see bruises under sleeves. "Then keep him," she said, and patted my arm. In the dining room, Professor Wallace lifted his spoon in a shaky salute and called, "Miss Parker, Chapter 8 tomorrow?" I promised him I would be there with his favorite poems. Even Margaret Allen, who wore red lipstick like a battle flag, gave me a small nod that said, "Go on, be reckless." The room had not changed, but it felt less like a waiting room for endings and more like a station where a few trains still arrived on time. That night, in my narrow bed, I held my notebook and did not write. I listened. A cart squeaked down the hall. Someone coughed. Somewhere a door clicked. Inside my chest, something that had lain buried, a small, stubborn green thing, pushed through the packed soil. I thought of the last time I had seen him, a summer evening near the river, the gnats thick, the future wide. I remembered a promise to meet by the freight tracks with a suitcase holding 2 dresses, a comb, and the parts of myself I couldn't leave behind. I remembered waiting, and how the waiting became a wound that taught me to close. Tomorrow, he would tell me what made him vanish. Tomorrow, I would say aloud the words I had never spoken to another soul. For the first time since Thomas locked the car door, sleep found me. It did not erase anything. It simply made room. And if you're listening, if you've ever had a past knock on your door when you were braced only for endings, then you'll understand. The garden bench wasn't just a piece of wood under a tree. It was a threshold. Tomorrow we will step through it. The next day stretched itself into eternity. Every hour felt like a taut string pulled to its breaking point. I went through the motions of Silver Pine's breakfast, the pointless morning exercise, a round of checkers with Alice, but all the while my mind was on the garden bench beneath the live oak. It wasn't just anticipation. It was fear. For 60 years, I had lived with a story I told myself about Charles Whitman's disappearance. The story was simple. He left me. He grew tired. He found someone else. My father used to sneer at the very idea of young love, telling me it was a distraction, not a future. Perhaps, I thought, he had been right. That was the lie I chose to live with, because the alternative, that Charles had been taken from me by forces I could not fight, was too painful to accept. And now, after all these decades, he wanted to tell me the truth. By the time supper ended, my palms were damp with sweat. I dabbed a tissue across my face, smoothed my dress, and walked slowly to the garden. The sun was already low, painting the sky in bruised shades of violet and amber. The oak tree loomed ahead, branches heavy with moss that swayed in the evening air. Charles was already there. He sat hunched, cane resting against the bench, staring at his trembling hands as if they carried the script of his confession. When he lifted his head and saw me, he tried to smile, but the weight of what he carried bent it into something fragile. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him, dark pools of sorrow, shame, and something deeper, relief. I sat beside him, leaving just enough space so the air between us could breathe. I've waited 60 years for this, Charles. Please don't keep me waiting any longer. He nodded slowly, as if bracing himself before stepping onto thin ice. It was the summer of 1961, he began, his voice low, deliberate. The night we were meant to leave. I had just finished my shift at the mill. I was walking toward our meeting spot by the freight tracks. I was carrying nothing but a small duffel bag and every ounce of hope I had. I was ready to start our life together, Nell. My chest tightened at the sound of the old nickname. But I never made it to you. His jaw flexed, and he paused before continuing. Your father was waiting for me outside the mill. He wasn't alone. He had 2 men with him, broad, hard men I'd seen around town. The kind of man he kept on retainer to do his dirty work. Before I could say a word, they dragged me into an alley and beat me until I blacked out. The world around me spun. I clutched the bench for balance. When I woke up, Charles said, his voice thick, your father was standing over me. He had a revolver. He pressed it to my temple and told me if I loved you, I'd leave and never come back. If I stayed, he said he wouldn't kill me, he'd make you suffer instead. He promised he'd ruin your life in ways I couldn't stop. And Nell, I believed him. I'd seen what that man was capable of. I knew he meant every word. Tears blurred my vision, burning hot against my cheeks. So you left, I whispered. Just like that. I left because I thought I was protecting you. His hand trembled harder now, whether from Parkinson's or grief, I couldn't tell. I staggered out of town that very night. Didn't even go back for my things. I couldn't risk them watching me, following me, hurting you. I thought you'd be safer if you hated me. The dam inside me cracked. 60 years of swallowed hurt flooded to the surface. Do you know what it did to me? Waiting by those tracks with my little suitcase? Do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering why I wasn't enough for you to stay? His face collapsed into grief. I know. And I've lived with that guilt every day since. Nell, I'm sorry. More sorry than words could ever stretch to say. I turned my gaze upward, toward the branches of the oak, searching for air. My father, my cruel, domineering father, had dictated my life even from beyond the grave. He had not only forced me into a marriage of convenience, but he had stolen my only chance at true love. And Charles, my Charles, had carried that silence like a coffin for decades. I pressed my hands together to still their shaking. There's something I never told anyone, I said quietly. Not even my late husband. Charles turned to me, confusion furrowing his brow. When you disappeared, I was already pregnant. The words tasted like iron. I had buried them so deeply that speaking them aloud felt like unearthing a body. Charles's eyes widened. His mouth parted, but no sound came. Pregnant, he finally choked out. I nodded, tears sliding unchecked down my face. My father discovered it. He locked me in my room for days. He said I had dishonored our family, that no one could ever know. One night, he took me to a woman in a secluded house outside town. She gave me a bitter tea. I remember the pain. The blood. I lost our baby, Charles. I never knew if it was a boy or a girl. I was never allowed to mourn. To everyone else, it never existed. But to me, my voice broke. To me, it was our child. Charles pressed his trembling hands against his face and sobbed. Not the restrained tears of an old man, but the raw, heaving sobs of a boy who had loved and lost everything. When he lowered his hands, his cheeks were streaked with grief. I should have fought harder, he whispered. I should have taken you that night, gun or no gun. I should have been there. I reached for his hand. It shook violently in mine, but I held it anyway, pressing my wrinkled fingers against the life that had once been entwined with mine. No, I said firmly. You can't blame yourself. We were young. We didn't know how merciless the world could be. You thought you were protecting me. And I thought you had abandoned me. We both carried wounds we didn't deserve. For a long moment, we sat in silence, our tears falling onto the cracked wood of the bench. Two old people grieving for a child they never knew, for a life stolen before it had a chance to bloom. And yet, in that grief, I felt something else: release. The burden I had carried in silence for 6 decades was finally shared. The truth was no longer mine alone. When Charles finally lifted his head, his eyes were red but resolute. I never stopped loving you, Nell. Not even when I married Anita. Not even when I built another life. You were the unfinished story in my heart. And sitting here now, I know one thing for certain. I will love you until my last breath. I believed him. Not because of the words, but because of the weight behind them. Because even as time had bent and scarred us, it had not erased us. I leaned my head against his shoulder, feeling the tremor of his body, the rhythm of his breathing. For the first time in 60 years, I let myself rest there. As the last light of evening slipped behind the trees, I closed my eyes and whispered, "True love doesn't die, Charles. It just waits." The evening after Charles and I shared our truths, I lay awake in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. The weight of our confessions pressed down on me, the beating he endured at my father's hands, the child I lost in silence, the decades wasted under lies and obedience. But woven through the grief was something else: resolve. For the first time since Thomas locked me in that car and delivered me to Silver Pines, I no longer felt powerless. I was still a mother, still a woman with dignity, still someone who could fight. And fight I would. It happened on a rainy Thursday, the kind of day when the clouds press low, making the halls of Silver Pines feel darker than usual. Most residents were gathered in the activity room, half watching a rerun of an old comedy show. I had taken refuge in the library, writing in my notebook, when the receptionist entered. "Mrs. Parker," she said, "your son is here to see you." The words cut like a knife. I hadn't seen Thomas since the day he left me here. My heart kicked painfully in my chest. Part of me wanted to refuse, to stay hidden, but another part, the stronger one, straightened my back. When I entered the visiting room, Thomas was pacing, his expensive suit damp at the shoulders from the rain. His hair was thinner, his eyes shadowed. But the arrogance was still there, etched into every line of his face. "Mom," he said curtly, "how are you adapting?" "I'm surviving," I answered. My voice was calm, but my knuckles were white against the handle of my cane. He sat down, fiddling with the cuff of his jacket. "Listen, I've been looking into other facilities. Silver Pines is fine, but there are more affordable places, more practical options. I think it's time to consider moving you." The word affordable snapped something inside me. More affordable for whom, Thomas? For you. He stiffened. "Mom, don't start. You don't understand the financial pressure I'm under." At that moment, the door opened. Charles, steadying himself on his cane, stepped inside. His eyes flicked between us, and in one swift glance, he understood what was happening. "This is my friend," I said firmly. "Charles Whitman." Thomas's mouth curled in a sneer. "Friend? Really? Is that what this is? He stopped himself, lowering his voice, but not the contempt. You're embarrassing yourself, mother. Sitting here at your age, clinging to some old man. And with my money paying for this place. Before I could speak, Charles stepped forward. His voice, though husky, was steady. With respect, sir, your mother isn't clinging to anyone. She's holding on to her dignity, something you seem to have misplaced. Thomas's face flushed crimson. Excuse me. But before the argument could escalate, a small figure appeared in the doorway. Lily. She must have come straight from school, her hair damp from the rain, her backpack still slung over one shoulder. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. Dad, she said, her voice trembling but clear. Stop this. Thomas turned on her, fury flashing. Lily, what are you doing here? I told you not to visit outside of scheduled hours. She didn't back down. Grandma doesn't deserve this. You lied to her. You lied to me. You sold her house. You used her retirement. And now you're trying to dump her in some cheaper place so you can save yourself. The room fell into stunned silence. My breath caught in my chest. Lily's courage radiated like fire. Thomas's voice dropped to a low growl. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a child. You don't understand what it takes to manage responsibilities. I understand enough, Lily shot back, her fists clenched at her sides. I understand that stealing from your own mother isn't responsibility, it's cruelty. Her words cut through him sharper than any blade. For the first time, I saw hesitation in his eyes. A flicker of shame, quickly masked by anger. You're all against me, he said bitterly. His gaze swept across me, Charles, and Lily. My own family. Fine. But don't come crying to me when reality hits you. He turned on his heel, storming toward the door. But before he left, I found my voice. Thomas, I called. He paused, his back to me. The shame isn't me sitting here with people who love me, I said. My voice trembled, but I forced it stronger. The shame is you stealing from your own mother, abandoning the woman who raised you, treating family like a bank account. You think you've stripped me of everything, but you're wrong. I still have my dignity, and I won't let you take that from me. He didn't turn around. He only muttered, You'll regret this, and slammed the door behind him. For a moment, the room was silent except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. My cane shook in my hand. Then Charles's steady palm rested against my shoulder. Lily threw herself into my arms, trembling. I'm so proud of you, Grandma, she whispered. I held her close, my tears wetting her hair. No, Lily. I'm proud of you. You had more courage at 17 than I had for most of my life. When we finally left the visiting room, the hallway was full of watching eyes. Other residents, staff, even Alice. Word had spread, and people had gathered silently to witness what had just unfolded. As I walked past, they didn't look at me with pity anymore. They looked at me with something else, respect. Alice pressed a cookie into my hand later, her eyes twinkling. You spoke for all of us, Eleanor. You said what we all wish we could say to our own families. Even Professor Wallace raised his trembling spoon in salute. A lioness, he murmured. I hadn't meant to become a symbol. But in that moment, I realized something profound. My fight wasn't just for me. It was for every abandoned elder in Silver Pines, for every silenced voice, for every forgotten soul. That evening, while I sat in the garden recovering from the confrontation, Michael, one of the younger nurses, approached me. He was kind, always treating us as people rather than burdens, but he had never sat beside me before. Mrs. Parker, he said carefully, I heard what happened today. And I need to tell you something. My grandmother died in a place like this. Alone. No one ever listened to her. I promised myself I'd make a difference if I ever worked in a home like this. He paused, lowering his voice. If your son is misusing your retirement, that's financial exploitation. It's a crime. I have a friend in social services who can help you understand your rights. My heart skipped. Could it be true? Could I really fight back, not just with words, but with the law? Michael's eyes met mine. If you're willing, I'll arrange for you to speak with him. You don't have to face this alone. I looked down at my trembling hands, then at the notebook on my lap, where I had scrawled the words, "For Lily, I will fight. For myself, I will survive." I closed the notebook, lifted my chin, and nodded. Yes, Michael. I'm willing. It's time. That night, for the first time since Thomas abandoned me at Silver Pines, I didn't cry myself to sleep. Instead, I lay awake with a fire in my chest. The battle for my dignity had begun. And this time, I wasn't alone. The morning after Michael made his offer, I awoke with a different kind of energy coursing through me. For weeks, I had felt like a leaf blown wherever the wind of circumstance carried me, tossed from my home, stripped of choice, locked into the halls of Silver Pines. But now, for the first time in months, I felt like a tree planting its roots into firm soil. Justice. That word alone gave me strength. 2 days later, Michael introduced me to Carla Jennings, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an air of quiet authority. She wasn't in uniform, but carried herself like someone who had walked into 100 battles and left with her integrity intact. "Mrs. Parker," she said warmly, shaking my hand. "Michael tells me your son may be misusing your funds. My job is to protect older adults from exploitation, neglect, and abuse. If you're ready, we can start by looking into your financial situation." My hands trembled as I passed her the small folder I had kept hidden since the day Thomas abandoned me. Inside were old bank statements, property tax papers, and receipts from my pension. Carla sifted through them with practiced precision, her eyes narrowing. "See here," she pointed. "Large withdrawals. Transfers to an account not in your name. This looks like financial exploitation. We can pursue an investigation, but I'll need your consent." Consent. For years, I had signed whatever Thomas put in front of me, blindly trusting him. Now, I understand the weight of giving my signature freely. With tears in my eyes, I signed the form. This time, I whispered, "It's on my terms." The following weekend, Lily returned. She came straight to my room, her cheeks flushed with determination. "Grandma," she said, her voice shaking but fierce, "I want to testify. If this goes to court, I'll tell them everything I saw. The day Dad dropped you off, the papers he signed, the way he used your money. I'll do it." I held her hands tightly, my heart swelling with pride. "Lily, you don't have to carry this burden. It isn't fair to put you in the middle of a fight between your father and me." "But I'm already in the middle," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "He wants me to believe he's doing the right thing. But I know he's lying, and I won't stay silent." Her words cut straight into my soul. I saw in her the fire I had once buried in myself. She was my redemption. Meanwhile, Charles sat with me nightly in the garden, his hand brushing mine. He didn't always speak, but his presence steadied me. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, he finally broke his silence. "Eleanor, when your father beat me that night, I told myself I would never be humiliated again. I let that fear keep me silent, even when I should have fought for us. Don't do the same now. Don't let fear steal the justice you deserve." I turned to him, tears spilling freely. I'm afraid, Charles. Afraid of losing Thomas completely. Afraid of dragging my family name into the mud. You've already lost him, Charles said gently. Not because you fought back, but because he chose greed over love. If you do nothing, you'll lose yourself too. His words cut deep, but they were true. The investigation moved quickly. Carla returned with more documents. My home had been sold without my knowledge, my retirement funds drained, and a new trust created under Thomas's name. He had disguised it as financial management to make it appear legitimate. This is fraud, Carla said firmly. And if you're ready, we'll file charges. The day I signed the legal complaint, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from power. For the first time, I wasn't a silent victim. I was a fighter. When the notice was delivered to Thomas, chaos erupted. He stormed into Silver Pines unannounced, his anger like a storm cloud filling the halls. You dare do this to me, he roared, his voice echoing through the building. After everything I've done for you? You think some social worker and a handful of old people will save you? I stood my ground, cane planted firmly, Charles at my side, Lily behind me. No, Thomas, I said, my voice steady. I don't need saving. I need justice. And I will not back down. The staff ushered him out, but not before he spat his final venom. If you destroy me, Mother, you destroy this family. But at that moment, I realized something. He had already destroyed it long ago. In the weeks that followed, the battle consumed everything. Carla gathered evidence, Lily wrote her statement, and I met with attorneys who treated me with dignity instead of pity. For the first time since my exile to Silver Pines, I felt alive. One night, after a particularly long meeting, I returned to my room and found a small envelope on my dresser. My name was written in careful cursive. Inside was a pressed rose and a short note from Charles. No matter what storms come, I will stand beside you. You gave me back my voice. Let me help you protect yours. I clutched the rose to my chest, my heart swelling with a bittersweet mixture of love and fear. The notice arrived one morning in early autumn. Thomas Parker versus Eleanor Parker. A hearing scheduled in 2 weeks. The day I had dreaded and prayed for all at once was finally here. I sat in the garden, staring at the paper in my hands. My legs shook, my chest ached, but inside, a flame burned brighter than ever. Silver Pines was no longer a prison. It had become my battlefield. And I, Eleanor Parker, abandoned mother, forgotten widow, betrayed parent, was ready for war. The day of the hearing arrived with skies as gray as my own spirit, but beneath the nervous tremor in my hands there burned a fire that no storm could quench. After months of humiliation, silence, and hidden tears, I was no longer merely Eleanor Parker, the woman abandoned in a nursing home. I was Eleanor Parker, the mother who had chosen to fight back. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and dust, a place where countless battles had been fought long before mine. As Michael wheeled me inside, Lily walked beside us with her chin lifted high. Charles trailed close behind, his cane striking the tiled floor in rhythmic defiance. Inside the courtroom, Thomas already sat at the defendant's table, his lawyer whispering furiously in his ear. My son looked tired, older than his years, but his arrogance was intact, chin raised, jaw clenched. When his eyes met mine, they narrowed into a glare sharp enough to wound. I wanted to cry, to remember him as the boy who once clung to my skirts and whispered goodnight prayers. But that boy was gone. The man before me was not my son anymore, he was my betrayer. Carla, seated beside me, gave my hand a gentle squeeze. Remember, she whispered, You are not here to beg. You are here to claim what was stolen. The judge entered, her black robe flowing like a shadow, and the room fell into silence. Thomas's attorney rose first. He spoke of misunderstandings, of financial management for an aging parent, of how Thomas had sacrificed his own resources to care for his mother. His voice was oily, smooth, every word designed to twist the truth into something palatable. Then it was Carla's turn. Your Honor, she said firmly, this is not a case of misunderstanding. This is elder exploitation. Mrs. Parker's home was sold without her consent. Her retirement funds were drained into her son's personal accounts. She was left in a care facility against her will, stripped of autonomy and dignity. This case is not about management, it is about theft, betrayal, and cruelty. Her words rang like a bell in the silent chamber. When it was my turn to speak, Michael helped me to the stand. My cane trembled beneath my hand, but I lifted my chin, forcing myself to meet the judge's eyes. I raised my son alone after his father passed, I began. My voice quivered at first, but soon steadied. I worked double shifts, skipped meals, and poured every ounce of my love into him. I trusted him. When age bent my back and weakened my hands, I believed he would carry me as I once carried him. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. But instead, he took my home, my savings, and my dignity. He abandoned me at Silver Pines without my knowledge or consent. He treated me not as a mother, but as a burden. The courtroom was silent, but for the scratch of pens. I am not here for revenge, I continued, my voice growing stronger. I am here for justice, not only for myself, but for every mother, father, and grandparent who has been silenced, exploited, or discarded. We may be old, but we are not worthless. We may be frail, but we are not invisible. We still matter. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to look away. Then came Lily. She walked to the stand, her school uniform still fresh from the morning. She looked so young, yet her voice carried the weight of generations. My father lied to me, she said. He told me Grandma was better off in Silver Pines, but I saw what he did. He sold her house. He used her money. He treated her like she was nothing. But she is everything. She is my grandmother. She is the strongest woman I know. Her words cracked like thunder. Even the judge's stern face softened. Thomas finally took the stand. His lawyer coaxed him through rehearsed lines, how he had only tried to protect me, how he had managed my finances responsibly. But when Carla pressed him, his composure faltered. Mr. Parker, she said sharply, why was your mother's retirement fund transferred into an account under your name? For safekeeping, he muttered. And why was her house sold without her written consent? He hesitated. She couldn't manage it anymore. Carla leaned in. Or was it because you needed the money to pay off your debts? The silence that followed was damning. His face reddened, his lawyer shuffled papers, but the truth hung in the air like smoke. The judge retired briefly, then returned with a face carved from stone. This court finds that Thomas Parker engaged in financial exploitation and elder neglect. Effective immediately, all assets will be restored to Mrs. Eleanor Parker. A legal guardian of her choosing will be appointed to oversee her affairs, and Mr. Parker will face penalties as outlined by law. The gavel struck. A sound like thunder, like justice itself. I gasped, the air rushing from my lungs as Lily threw her arms around me. Charles squeezed my hand until I thought my bones might break, and for once I didn't mind. Thomas slumped in his chair, his arrogance cracked wide open. He looked at me, not with anger, but with something like despair. Yet I felt no triumph, no gloating. Only grief for the boy he once was, and release for the man he had become. Weeks later, I stood once more in the garden of silver pines, though it no longer felt like a cage. Carla had helped me appoint Lily as my legal guardian, with Charles and Michael as trusted supporters. My home was gone, but in its place I had gained something far greater: freedom, respect, and the courage to reclaim my voice. That evening, Charles and I sat beneath the dying sun. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I wasted decades hiding from what I felt," he said softly. "But if these last months have taught me anything, it's that time is too short for silence." He opened the box. Inside lay a simple gold band, humble but shining. "Eleanor Parker," he whispered, "will you walk with me? What time we have left side by side, without fear?" Tears filled my eyes, but this time they were not from sorrow. They were from joy. "Yes, Charles," I said, my voice steady and full. "Yes." As I lay in bed that night, notebook in hand, I wrote my closing truth. They thought they could silence me with age, with betrayal, with abandonment. But they forgot something. Even a fading flame can still burn. And when one flame is joined by another, by friendship, by love, by the courage of a granddaughter, it can light up the darkest night. I closed the book, set it on the nightstand, and smiled into the quiet. At 81, I had finally found my justice, my dignity, my love, and most of all, my freedom. You know, life has a way of breaking us in the quietest of places. Sometimes it isn't the storms or the tragedies that undo us, it's the betrayal of those we once called our own. I never thought my twilight years would be spent fighting for my voice, for my dignity, for the simple truth that I still matter. But here I am. And I tell you this, not for pity, but for hope. To every soul who has been discarded, silenced, or made to feel invisible, please listen. You are not forgotten. You are not worthless. Your story, your breath, your presence still carry weight in this world. I have learned that justice doesn't always come swiftly, and love doesn't always arrive when we expect it. But it does come if we dare to stand, if we dare to speak, even when our hands tremble and our voices shake. So tonight, I close my eyes not as a victim, but as a woman reborn. My name is Eleanor Parker. I am 81 years old, and though life tried to bury me in silence, I chose to rise in truth. And if you are listening now, remember this: the fire in you is never too small to light the darkness. Hold on to it, guard it, and let it guide you home. Thank you for listening to me. If my story touched you, please share it, speak it, pass it forward, and subscribe to this channel. Because our stories, your story, are what keep the light alive.